Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Today we are looking at Lady Stoneheart. But first of all, let me just do a very quick, if you're watching this a bit later, then feel free to skip forward. This is just a public service announcement. If you have tickets for the first couple of showings for the Mad King play, I think they've just been cancelled. Do go and check your emails. They've set up another performance for people who have lost out on that. So please do go and check that out. It will now, I think the first performance will now be on the 23rd of July. But we're not talking about that here today. Today we are talking about Lady Stoneheart. As always, I will be shaping this around questions I've got from my patrons, and I will try and take as much as I can from the chat as we are going through. So let's get, well, I normally do a sort of a bit of a background and history to a character. I think we all know where we're at with Lady Stoneheart. Obviously, this is Catelyn Stark. 3 days after the Red Wedding, Nymeria pulled her from the water and just hung around with her until her body was found. And then Nymeria ran off. And then we get the Brotherhood without banners finding her body, and we get Beric Dondarrion, who decides he is going to give her the kiss of life. He is going to transfer his life essence. Remember, by this point, 6 times he has been resurrected, and he decides to pass on his life energy to her. And he now comes back as Lady Stoneheart. She is different in character to Catelyn Stark, but what lingers, what remains from Catelyn Stark is very clear. She is there, from what we've seen, she is after vengeance for what happened at the Red Wedding. She is there looking, basically to kill any Lannister and any Frey that she comes across. And also, she seems to be wanting to find, as you would expect, her children. She is convinced that Arya is still alive, and she has sent her people out looking for Arya. She's also, we'll talk about this a bit more in a moment, she is also there with Robb Stark's, her son Robb's crown. So that's the situation we're in. And she is, we call her Lady Stoneheart, but Mother Merciless is one of the other names that she's going by. The Silent Sister is another. She can't speak, really. Just when she talks, she's got the cut obviously across her throat. When she talks, just this kind of gravelly sound comes out. She's got Harwin, who we met briefly earlier on in the story, seems to be able to translate for her, but she's not the same person. And she has taken control of the Brotherhood without banners, but she's also taken them in a different way. And when we actually meet Thoros of Myr, when Brienne meets Thoros of Myr, he's actually quite open about this. She's taken the Brotherhood without banners, which was a flawed organization, but it had quite a clear and positive remit. It was there on behalf of the people to be just standing up for them in this time of war. And that was mostly anti-Lannister, but they weren't there. They were without banners. They weren't there just saying we're part of Team Stark. Lady Stoneheart has taken over, and quite a lot of the original Brotherhood have gone away because they don't want a part of this. And they are now just hunting down Lannisters, Freys, and stringing them up. They're trying to get information from them, and then after they got that information, they're just killing them. This is a very different field to the Brotherhood without banners. So that's our kind of background to where we're at. Let's go to some questions. Kelly Font saying, how did she get hold of Rob's crown? I will talk about that in just one moment. Diego Godoy saying, hola, Robert, hola. Do you think Lady Stoneheart could pass the flame of life onto someone else, the same way that Beric passed it on to her? Corvus Corax asking the same question, I think, from the opposite perspective, saying good evening, Robert. If Beric died giving Cat the last kiss, does that suggest if one is on their second life, passing the kiss means death? What does that imply for Melisandre, possibly bringing John back? Thanks for all you do. Okay, so we don't know the detail of this, is the short version. I say this a lot. George R. R. Martin keeps the details of his magic system quite close and also quite vague, deliberately vague. He thinks that if you let it be known all the details of how magic works in your world, then it loses some of its mystique, it loses some of its scare factor. So he hasn't told us the details of this. For Beric, it was very clear. He was deliberately passing on his life to someone else. Is it possible to bring someone back from the dead without passing on your own life? Well, yes, because that's what Thoros did to Beric several times. So does that mean anything for Melisandre and John? Well, my take is that what's going to happen with Melisandre and John is a very different thing. We're not going to go down all of the detail of that right now, but I don't think that what we're going to be looking at with John is the same kind of feel that we had on the TV show, which is Melisandre doing some magic stuff, a little while later John reappearing. John is going to, I think, his spirit, his soul is going to pass into his direwolf. It's going to go into Ghost. So John is going to survive in Ghost, and then his body is probably, they're going to be fighting over it, but it's probably going to be frozen in the ice cells in Castle Black. Then his body is going to be unfrozen, and his spirit or soul is going to be pushed back into his body. I think that's what's going to happen. I suspect that Melisandre will claim the credit for this. I did a whole video on how that might work. If you're interested, do go and check that out. But I don't think that this is a case of someone giving the last kiss, the last rites, effectively to somebody through the Red God's power, bringing someone back. That's not what I think is going to be happening with John. So I don't think it has that kind of implication. In terms of, does it suggest that someone on their second life passing the kiss means death? Potentially. Melisandre, we've speculated before, may well also be a firewhite of some kind. There's a lot of evidence for that. If you're wanting to go down there, again, I did another video on this one, but if you wanted to go down that route, just check out the things that she thinks in her own POV chapter, the things that she just offhandedly thinks, that she doesn't sleep, she doesn't need to eat, she's that she doesn't get energy from outside in the world. She feels like her god is powering her in some way. The blood that is there seems to be black, so there's a lot of stuff going on with her that makes it feel and sound like she may well also be a firewhite of some kind. And she's obviously very old, a firewhite of some kind. But she clearly has magic, and that magic means that she can do things without doing what Beric did, which was just giving up his entire life essence. I don't think there's any hint that she would have to do the same. So I think Melisandre is a case apart in this. Diego's question, whether Lady Stoneheart could pass that life on to someone else. I mean, the logic of the universe seems to suggest, yeah, that if Beric could pass it on to someone else, then she could. Whether there's any particular secret to how to do that, we don't know. Was Beric taught by Thoros about this? Again, we don't know. So, yeah, theoretically, that could happen. Whether it will, I'm not so sure. Per Marcus Risman saying 7 blessings, Robert, and to you from a lovely summer in Sweden. Well, I hope it's got very hot again here in the UK for probably the next few days, but I'm sure Sweden's a little bit cooler. There are a lot of theories about Stoneheart's role and purpose. One interesting theory I found is that Catelyn had knowledge of Rob's last will. I find that particularly intriguing since John will most likely become a Firewhite as well. A curious detail I picked up is that Lady Stoneheart possesses a crown. At the same time, we know that being resurrected takes something from you and that memories fade. Do you think this theory is plausible and could actually pan out, perhaps in a meeting with Arya, where the knowledge is passed on, or a meeting between the two Whites, or was Catelyn dead for too long? You're also praising House of the Dragon, which I have to say I've really enjoyed season 3 so far. I thought every episode was good in its own way. Okay, so there's a few questions there, I think. So the crown, yes, she has got a crown. In fact, I've got a video coming out, I think tomorrow, called something like "What Happened to Robb Stark's Crown?" because it's quite intriguing. So Robb Stark had a new crown made because the old crown for the kings in the north, long gone, probably taken by Aegon Targaryen when Torrhen Stark bent the knee. When Robb Stark was made king in the north, they forged a new crown based on the look of the old one. And he wore it, we know. We see from Kat's perspective what it looks like. She has this kind of weird perspective when it comes to Robb, because she sees him still as like her little boy, but at the same time, he's a king now. So he wears it. He clearly takes it up to the twins for what becomes the Red Wedding. And when he dies, and you will remember that they paraded his body with his direwolf Grey Wind's head on his shoulders. On top of Grey Wind's head was the crown. So the House Frey got hold of it. After that, it got taken by Walder Frey's heir, who was the guy who was in charge of the if you remember the siege at Riverrun, which the Freys were pretty rubbish at, and then Jaime Lannister turns up and sorts it all out. So he has it, and he has used it to crown a woman that he's with, who then takes the title the Queen of Whores. So she has it. So this is now like the third, fourth person to have it. Jaime Lannister basically says, both of you go, but leave the crown. They seem to take the advice to go, or the order to go, but also take the crown with them. They get caught by Lady Stoneheart. Lady Stoneheart takes the crown and she has it. And we see it when Brienne meets her. She's there holding the crown in her hand, just sort of kind of spinning it on the table. And we're told this is a complete, I don't know, uncertainty we have, but Brienne sees that her eyes are glistening. They're shrouded, but the eyes are glistening. Does that mean that she was crying? Can Firewhites cry? We don't know, but clearly having this crown is making her emotional in some way. So yes, Lady Stoneheart has the crown. The question is, what is she going to do with it? Which ties us back into this idea about the will. Yes, you're right. She knows what is in Robb Stark's will. She was one of the witnesses to it. In fact, before Robb actually wrote his will, he had a conversation with Cat, with his mother, at Oldstones, of all places. And he says, and she agrees, I need an heir, because they've just discovered, obviously it's just a rumour, but Bran and Rickon are both dead. And Rob has newly married, but he's not got any children yet. And he thinks, okay, so if I die, who inherits? Who's next in line? Normally it was going to be Bran, and if not Bran, then Rickon. But if it's not them, then Sansa? Neither of them want Sansa to inherit, not because they don't like Sansa, but because she's married to Tyrion. And that would basically hand the North over to the Lannisters. So not Sansa. And then Cat, his mother, says, well, what about Arya? And he says, let's be honest, no one's seen her for a couple of years. She's dead. And Cat says, well, we don't know that. She's probably still alive, maybe still alive. And he says, get real. The person I'm going to make my heir is Jon Snow. I'm a king. I can now legitimize someone, so I will legitimize Jon, and I will make Jon my heir until I have children. That, from his perspective, he doesn't know the Red Wedding's about to happen. From his perspective, this is just a short-term measure. He's going to have children soon. When he has children, they will inherit, and so Jon was just a stopgap, just in case. But anyway, he does not have children. We know this. We see Jane Westling a bit later. She's very clearly not pregnant and very clearly hasn't had children. So his heir is who he named in the will. And the will was witnessed by half a dozen people, one of whom was his mother. Now, that legitimizes Jon and says Jon is now the heir. So according to the will, according to the written will, the heir, not just to Winterfell, but also to the title of King in the North, is Jon Snow, or Jon Stark, as he is, because Rob has legitimized him. It's just that Jon doesn't know, nobody up there knows. So that's where legally we're at. But we get a number of issues going on with this, is that clearly Rob was acting, when he wrote his will, he was acting under a misapprehension about the fact that Bran and Rickon, he thought, were dead. They're not. So they should inherit. He also thought that Arya was dead. If he thought Arya was alive, Arya would have been who inherited, but he thought she was dead. Lady Stoneheart has history, and as Cat had history with Jon, she does not want Jon inheriting. She said some actual real arguments to Rob about the idea about Jon being made heir, because, as she says, he may well be okay with Rob and he would never rebel against Rob. What about his children? What about his children's children? Might they? If you add him into the line of succession, then suddenly you create an extra challenge. And she kind of name checks Targaryen history just to say, you've seen how this happens. Remember the Dance of the Dragons? You remember the Blackfire Rebellion? The whole issue of who might inherit, if it's a little bit cloudy, it becomes an issue. So she's got problems with this, and she's also convinced that Arya is alive. And her conviction that Arya is alive is only added to when she comes back as Lady Stoneheart, because who does she fall in with? Who is she now the leader of? The Brotherhood Without Banners. And they will be able to tell her, multiple witnesses, oh yeah, we know Arya. We met her. She was here. We were going to bring her to you, but she escaped. And she escaped with the Hound. And then we know that she's been sending people out hunting for the Hound. They're looking for her. They've got evidence about where they might have gone. They've even managed to track down where the Hound was buried, and the people who took the Hound's helmet. That's now Lemon Cloak has now got the Hound's helmet, so they're hunting for Arya. She has this crown. She thinks that Bran and Rickon are dead. She doesn't want to give it to Sansa. She definitely doesn't want to give it to Jon. Lady Stoneheart wants to crown Arya Stark. That is the situation we've got going on. Now, what Arya thinks about Lady Stoneheart when they meet is a completely different matter. Again, I did a video on that. I've done a few videos about the Riverlands plot recently. But she is there wanting to crown Arya Stark as Queen in the North. You also were asking about sort of memories fading. I think I probably got a question related to this a bit later, but I'll mention it now. Qyburn told a story. Qyburn is clever. He's not a good guy. He's not nice. We don't like him much, but he understands stuff. And he tells Jaime a story when he's talking about his studies, which are into life and death. And he says, what happens after death? It's like you go into a room, and in the room there's a chair, and you look at the chair and there's a little indentation on it, and you can smell there's some perfume in the air, and you know that just before you got there was a woman there. You can see the evidence of her. That is what lingers of her presence. And he goes on to say, that is what we're looking about after death. It's a matter of what lingers of a person. And what lingers of Catelyn Stark seems to be what she was focusing on, understandably, just when she died, which is this horror and hatred and need for vengeance against those who wronged her and her family. So that seems to be what it is. That's not the case with Beric. Now, Beric was brought back, and he's not left with just bad things. He's left with what lingered of him, which is this commission to go out into the Riverlands and look out for the people. Robert Martin saying, who edits your videos? I love it. They need to be acknowledged. They do. Absolutely. So, yeah, I'm not a video editor. I will happily say this. I'm not a video editor. If you go back to my very, very earliest videos, I did them. You can see that I'm not an editor. That's not my skill set. I can do other stuff. That's not one of the things. So I have got several people who very kindly edit videos for me. I will name check Mark, Pete, and Adam here. When I hit 1 million subscribers on the main channel, I'll put up I asked them, and they're very happy to. I will put up a picture and give them all of the love because they absolutely deserve it. So yeah, I'm very happy to share the love on this. Scripts and things, unless I say otherwise, that's all me. But video editing, no, I'm very happy to give other people credit for that. Kelly Summers saying Lady Stoneheart might be heading north if she's heard about the announcement of Ramsay marrying Arya. Now, this is an interesting one. So yes, so Ramsay Bolton marries Arya Stark in Winterfell. Now, we know it's not really Arya Stark. It's actually Jane Poole. Quite a few other people know this as well. I did do a video called something like Who Knows Jane Poole is Fake Arya, something along those lines. When you start adding it up, actually quite a few people do. What is holding this as a lie that people are accepting is the fact that the Boltons and the Lannisters are in power at the moment. The moment they're not, that's when the whole thing will start crashing down. Because there are a huge amount of people who either know that that's not Arya. For example, Theon knows that's not Arya. And there's quite a few people who very strongly suspect, like the Manderleys, that that's not Arya. And Lady Barbary Dustin as well seems to be on the same page. So there are quite a few people who either know it's not Arya or suspect not. The big thing, though, is there's an information gap, a geographical information gap. The north is separated from the south by the neck, and there's only one road that goes to and fro, and it takes a long time to go through there. And Moat Cailin has changed hands several times, and it actually getting the information through is not straightforward. So there's no evidence at the moment to suggest that Lady Stoneheart has heard that Ramsay Bolton is marrying Arya Stark. Even if she did hear that, then I think we're looking at a situation where she's got better information, and she will not believe that. She will think that's the Boltons lying, because she knows, because she's Catelyn Stark. It's worth mentioning. She's clever. George R. R. Martin writes her as clever. Now, we don't often think about that when we're thinking about who are the cleverest characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, because sometimes she doesn't make the smartest moves, but that doesn't or shouldn't undermine the fact that she is intellectually often well ahead of the game. Now, there's a lot of evidence to back that up. First of all, you can see early on with Ned, the way that George R. R. Martin writes her, we see Ned through her POV as much as through his own POV to start with. She's there thinking to herself things like, oh, Ned will figure it out in a moment. I just need to not say anything and he will get there soon. Then we get to Tyrion, when she captures Tyrion, and she takes Tyrion north up the road, the King's Road, and then heads off to the east. Therefore, making sure everybody thinks that she's going up to Winterfell when in fact she's not. She's going to the Eyrie. And Tyrion, who is written as one of the most clever characters in the story, he thinks, I've been outsmarted by Catelyn Stark. That's what he thinks. So again and again, we get her being clever. When we get the build up to the Red Wedding, when you read it, perhaps for the second time, you see the amount of things that she just clocks. You see that she doesn't trust Walder Frey. Everyone is always saying, well, of course we have to trust him. Yeah, he's one of our bannermen. He's sworn to us. Yes, this is going to be awkward. Yes, he's going to be annoying about this, but nothing really bad's going to happen. And she's the one who's thinking, I'm concerned about this. Why is it that they're separating Robb from his direwolf? Why is it that I have to remind him to provide the salt for guest right? Why is it that this? Why is it that? And she's working her way through all this. So that's quite a digression, but it comes back to the fact that she's clever, and she figures out a whole load of stuff, and she will know that Arya is in the south, not the north. If the reports that she's heard are true, and she's got lots of eyewitness reports as to where Arya is, Arya cannot be the Arya that is being married in the north. Let's go to the chat. I think I had a question from Infamous Elephant saying, not Lady Stoneheart. Where is magic in House of the Dragon? Lots of dragons, but the old god magic seems strongest, even though wargs and greenseers exist without dragons. Where is magic in House of the Dragon? Okay, so House of the Dragon, they've played up two types of magic in House of the Dragon. They've played up the dragon dreams, Helena. It's kind of dropped off in this season, but certainly in seasons 1 and 2, Helena and the Dragon Dreams and others with the Dragon Dreams was a big thing. You can link this in with Viserys, with the prophecy, the Song of Ice and Fire. That bit they have played up more than was played up in Game of Thrones, more than even is played up in the books, Song of Ice and Fire. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the kind of the magic of the old gods, the Green Seer magic. Through Alice Rivers, we've seen the Green Men. We've seen we've seen Daemon getting green dreams simply by sleeping in a bed made from weirwood. We've seen her putting his hand on the weirwood tree and him getting all of these visions. We've seen so much. These are the two things they've played up in House of the Dragon. What they've is tangential, I guess. The other thing they've played up a lot is this dragons aren't they can never be controlled. They've played that a huge amount. And everything else, by kind of implication, they've kind of played down a bit. So Alice Rivers, I did a video, I think yesterday it came out, about Alice Rivers. One of the things in the book, which is really obvious, is the breadth of the magic that she does. She seems, allegedly, she sees visions in the flames. She also sees the future in the clouds. She has a dragon later on. She seems to be able to remotely choke people to death or make their heads explode. There's a whole load of stuff that allegedly she can do, which don't kind of fit into all of the bits of magic that we already know. So they've simplified it a lot in House of the Dragon. The magic is there, but they've lessened the breadth of it, if that makes sense. Let's go to where were we at? Jinty M saying, good evening, Robert, and good evening to you. I really enjoyed the Red Wedding 2.0 video. Good, I'm glad. I agree, it's highly likely Jaime and Brienne will play a part in setting up this trap on behalf of Lady Stoneheart. Yeah, that's my working assumption there. It also wouldn't surprise me if Arya was back in time to play a part 2 as a wild card, reuniting with her mother at the Twins as intended, but one wedding later. Your question goes on, but just to quickly pick up on that, I don't think this second Red Wedding is going to be at the Twins. I think this is going to be at Riverrun. Just where, and if you missed that video, by the way, the feeling is that Lady Stoneheart clearly wants to kill all the Frey's and Lannisters she possibly can. And there is a wedding coming up between a Frey and a Lannister, at which lots of Freys and Lannisters will be invited. And it is somewhere, Riverrun, where you would think it's not the hardest place for those guys to get into, because Cat obviously grew up there and knows it well. The Blackfish is out. He used to be in charge of its defenses. And they've also got Tom 07, the bard, who is a minstrel. He's in there and is very much a part of the Brotherhood Without Banners and can probably help them out a bit with information or maybe some other things. So it's all set up there. They will know about this. And Jaime, who is going to meet Lady Stoneheart as we have left the story, he will know about this. So I think that it's all set up for a second, a reverse Red Wedding or Red Wedding 2.0, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, GTM's saying, would it not bring true closure to Lady Stoneheart, Brienne, and Jaime's arcs if Sansa was present also? The Vale Lords she's in company with at present have far more interest to attend to in the Riverlands than in the north, with several having ties to Riverland families. Although Littlefinger is Lord of Harrenhal and Lord Paramount of the Riverlands and publicly a Lannister man. So he's probably going to get an invite. I know he declared to Sansa's intentions to take her and the Vale army north, but can that happen before anything in the Riverlands has been resolved? So I like the thinking. And yes, the arcs for Brienne and Jaime and Lady Stoneheart do need Sansa involved in some way. They all made, if you look at the three of them, they got this kind of like triangle of oaths that they made to each other, which is about Arya and it's about Sansa. So yes, it would make sense for Sansa to be involved here somehow. But is she going to? Now, as you say, the start in the Winds of Winter, the start of the Winds of Winter, she's very clearly in the Vale, and she seems to be there probably for the first few chapters of that for her. And Littlefinger has said that the plan is for her to get the Vale and then to head north and get Winterfell. So would he go through the Riverlands to get to the north? Probably not. The most likely thing would be to get a boat, possibly from Gulltown, go up to White Harbour and up from there, rather than try to get through the Riverlands all the way up north. That would be a longer journey. It would take longer, and it would be more dangerous. Added to which, when winter comes, the road, the high road out or in and out of the Vale is blocked off with snows, and the snows have come to the Riverlands. So if she doesn't go soon, then probably that way is out of reach anyway. That's not a possibility. They know in the Vale, it's not like they're surprised by this. They know that winter is coming. That is why Sansa has come down. Everyone has come down from the Eyrie. This is the last chapter or so that we have of her, is her descending from the Eyrie down to the Vale, the basin of the Vale, because that's what the House Arryn does every time there's a winter. They move down from the top of this mountain because it would get very cold, and they come down all the way and they set up base there. So practically, no, I don't think she's going to be going into the Riverlands any day soon. Politically, that's not what Littlefinger's still in charge, and he's wanting to head to the north. Thematically, yeah, I get it completely. Her being there would make a lot of sense, but maybe Brienne and Jaime and Lady Stoneheart's arcs have to carry on for a little bit more until they do find Sansa. Let's go to Martin S. I've been thinking a lot about House of the Dragon, Season 3, Episode 3, where Rhaenyra chooses not to legitimize Corlys Velaryon's bastard sons. I'm wondering if her decision actually makes sense. I understand the political angle. She wants to avoid looking like she's playing favorites, but House Velaryon has been a most loyal supporter. And the bastard sons have personally fought for her on the front lines. And from Rhaenyra's perspective, her entire story is built on her own legitimacy, meaning anyone who sided with the Greens is a traitor. How much right or standing do houses that side with the Greens or even stayed neutral have to demand they be treated with the same consideration? Isn't she running a massive risk of alienating Corlys Velaryon? Perhaps she feels she can afford it because he's less powerful than he used to be. On the other hand, should Corlys have exercised more patience instead of forcing the issue now? Should he have waited for her to stabilize her rule in King's Landing? Then again, he could die soon. Okay, so a lot of questions here. This is building on the last episode of House of the Dragon. In the books, Corlys Velaryon, just to pick on your last point, is in his late 70s. So yeah, he's still a fine figure of a man there. I don't know what age. I can't remember the actor's name, but I don't know what age he's being presented as on the TV show. But in the books, then he is a lot older than that. And although he's not, yeah, frail, he does think to himself, "This is my last hurrah. This is the one last fight." So, yeah, that's the situation he's in. As for why Rhaenyra does this, I don't think it's so much um, a matter of um, trying to not appear like she's got favourites. I don't think it's that. I think it's the matter of her claim was constantly being undermined, not by her legitimacy. Nobody thought that she was illegitimate, but they thought that her children, her three oldest children, were illegitimate, which they were. But the argument was made that she should not inherit because the person who would inherit after her was a bastard. She, when she comes in and takes power, she is battling against that as this idea. Nobody doubts that she is legitimate herself, but the argument has been long made over more than a decade that she should not be queen because she's got bastard children who will inherit after her. If the first act that anyone sees her doing is to be legitimizing somebody else's bastard children, then she will look like, just in political terms, she's the queen who does the bastard thing. She's all about the illegit. She doesn't care about the true line of succession. It's just whoever she wants. She says, "All right, I don't care whether you're legitimate, whether you actually should be inheriting. You will inherit. Same over there." So that's what she's battling against here. Should she have handled it, or could she have handled it better on the TV show? Yeah. And to be fair, this is different in the books. But could she have handled it differently on the TV show? Absolutely. There's no doubt there. Could Corlys have handled it differently? Yes. But you understand his perspective. He has come on an arc. This is one of those things where in House of the Dragon, you have to remember episodes 1 and 2 are really the end of season 2. So if you're looking at character arcs, that's what we've got going on. Here, the character arc is for Corlys Velaryon from where he was in season 1, where he's saying that people remember the name, not blood. That's what goes down in history books, because he accepts Lucerys as his heir. And even though he knows that Lucerys has got 0 Velaryon blood, he accepts that. When we get to the end of the season, he's there saying, "Okay, actually, what really matters to me is who are my children. It is blood. It's not just the name." He wants his children to have the name because they're his children. So that's his character arc that he's gone through. Season 3, this is where we're starting now. We're starting a new arc. He has made this decision. Rhaenyra has opposed it, and we have to see where that goes. At the very least, we're looking at a breakdown between the Queen and her hand. Jojo Action saying, "I have read that Dan and Dave, the showrunners for Game of Thrones, didn't include Lady Stoneheart in Game of Thrones for mainly 2 reasons. They felt too many resurrections would take away from the major one, and because of future plot developments in the novels that George R. R. Martin told them about. Do you have any theories as to what those plot developments might be that they weren't so sure about?" Well, they didn't include, and it's probably worth saying that Lady Stoneheart or Catelyn Stark died at the end of season 4, which is when George R. R. Martin, that was his last season of being involved. He did the big handover meeting with the showrunners,
And they went to the premiere for season 4, and Michelle Fairheap, who played Catelyn Stark, was there, and George R. R. Martin apparently said to her, "Look forward to seeing you next season." And she's saying, "Well, I'm not back next season. My character's dead." And he's like, "Well, what about Lady Stoneheart?" And she's, "No, that's not happening." That's how he found out about it. So he thought that this was a big miss, that this was very important for the story. The showrunners have sort of come back through various places that we've heard. They've sort of mentioned this. The reasons they've given are, firstly, that this takes away from the emotional impact of the Red Wedding, which was a huge, on TV, it was massive. Culturally, you know this, it was culturally massive event, and they didn't want to take away from the impact of that by saying, well, it didn't matter that much because this character, at least you thought was dead, isn't dead. That was the first reason they gave. The second reason is that this would take away from, rather than foreshadow, Jon's resurrection. So it would. So Jon coming back should be a big surprise, they thought. And if the casual viewer went into that thinking, oh, yeah, but people can come back, then it would be the impact would be diluted. So that's the second reason. The third is, I think, and I think this is what you're alluding to, is the kind of, and they didn't use this language, this is more George R. R. Martin language, but they didn't want the butterfly effect of having Lady Stoneheart there. They were trying their best to constrain the story. Now, you will see this when you get to season 5 going forward on Game of Thrones. We're kind of rehearsing old discussions here, but they didn't include Fagon, young Griff. That whole storyline, no. Dawn. There was a Dornish plot, but it was a very cut down Dornish plot. The Iron Islands plot, there was an Iron Islands plot, but it was very cut down. The decision was clearly made around that time. They were going to squash this plot down to the central parts that they already had, which meant that whatever it was that Lady Stoneheart was going to be doing, they gave that to other people, which is where this idea about the Red Wedding 2.0 comes from, because obviously in the show, Arya comes back and kills a whole load of Freys at a wedding. It makes us wonder, surely we know Lady Stoneheart must be there for something, not just killing a few random Freys we can't remember the name of. That's not what she's there for. She's going to do big things there in the Riverlands. Probably the big thing is a new Red Wedding, which is going to help overturn Lannister and Frey rule in the Riverlands, and probably she will try to crown or Arya, or try and oppose Jon as the idea of this the natural inheritor. So there are the reasons that the showrunners gave, and there's the reasons that I think we can see by looking at what they've done. And the biggest part of that is them cutting this story down to something that's more workable for them, that they could finish off within a few seasons. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. Brian Valco saying, to be fair to the TV show, plenty of smart book fans also weren't fans of young Griff or Dawn or wherever George R. R. Martin keeps expanding rather than focusing on the characters. I mean, I understand that. It was very noticeable at about that point in the book story. He expanded the story hugely, which has, I think, added to his problems in trying to finish the story, because it's got a whole lot more complicated. Quick flick
through. Justin J saying hello from Lake Tahoe, Nevada. Hi there. And Carl Karsnark saying William the Bastard became William the Conqueror. Yeah, so William the Conqueror was known as William the Bastard. If you win and if you cement your victory, then yeah, that's when you can change the rules. I don't think that that's what we're looking at here. Lady Pushkin saying I'm listening, but eyes are going. Sorry, not reading much. Not a problem. If you need to check out, that's not a problem at all. Let's go to a question from Flame G saying, hello, Robert. Back to sunshine and high temperatures. Absolutely. My question is, do you think George R. R. Martin would ever give Catelyn Stark the arc to find out that Jon isn't Ned's son? Or do you think she'd die for a second time not knowing the truth? I mean, I've come across this a few times. I like the idea. I really do like the idea that she would discover this because it would help heal retrospectively the relationship she had with Ned. And also it would retrospectively help heal the relationship she had with Jon. So I like this idea. The reality is, though, that there are two problems. The first problem, or obstacles to this happening. The first is that not even Jon knows this yet. This is still a secret in the books, and it's probably going to be a secret for at least another book. Who's going to reveal this? Possibly Howland Reed, probably not for at least until the end of this, the Winds of Winter. So that's the first thing. The information will not be anywhere. The second thing is she's in the Riverlands and Jon's at the Wall, and winter has come. And I think we sometimes underestimate quite how big these distances are, quite how long that would take. She's got business in the Riverlands. The moment she's not even thinking of leaving the Riverlands, she's going to be in the Riverlands for at least half a book. Even if then she decides to go north, that'll take a long time. That's months of journeying to get to the north. So there's a long distance, a long gap between where she is and where that bit of information is. So I like the idea, but the practicality of her finding out, maybe in a book's time, it will look more likely. Right now, it seems quite a long way away, and her arc is not going there. Let's go to Sir Friend saying, happy Thursday, Robert. I know you've touched on this recently, but it is an interesting thought. Does R'hllor have anything to do with Lady Stoneheart? Or will she do something R'hllor wants to happen? One of the avenues they really pushed on the show was Beric being kept alive by the Lord of Light because he had a purpose. Lady Stoneheart is unlikely to have anything to do with defeating the others like Beric did, but is there anything there? So, yeah, let's go to the purpose thing. Beric was kept alive for a purpose. What is his purpose? His purpose seems to be to bring Lady Stoneheart back. What role does Lady Stoneheart have? Well, I think her role is going to be a big one in the Riverlands. And if she plays the lead role in ending the Lannister and Frey control over the Riverlands, that is a purpose. Beric, then I think we sometimes big up Beric Dondarrion as being a more major figure than he is in the books because of what happened on the TV show. On the TV show, yeah, he went north, he had his flaming sword, he fought the others, he was big and important. In the books, he is big and important, but he never leaves the Riverlands. He does good stuff in the Riverlands, and that's it. So his purpose seems to be focused in on the Riverlands. And if he passes that on to Lady Stoneheart, then we can perhaps assume that her role is doing big and important stuff in the Riverlands. So from his perspective, from the perspective of Beric Dondarrion and his purpose being passed on to her, I don't think that means that it needs to be a big thing for R'hllor other than helping out in the Riverlands. Is there anything connecting her with R'hllor more broadly? I think not. I mean, I've looked at this. I don't think. I mean, she's not worshipping R'hllor. Yes, they've got Thoros of Myr there, but he doesn't seem to be proselytizing all that much. If and added to which, George R. Martin is very clear: the gods are not going to make an appearance here. The gods are not about to leave a mark that everyone says, right? Oh, we know that was R'hllor. That was the red god doing something proactively there. Everything is going to be left open a little bit to interpretation. So I don't think that we're going to see Lady Stoneheart being a servant of R'hllor in any significant way. She has got her drives. She's got a very clear agenda, which may well coincide with what R'hllor wants, but it's not about the worship of R'hllor. Couple of questions in the chat. Nadia Vanalbada. I've probably mispronounced that. I do apologize. How do you reconcile Cat's intelligence with Lady Stoneheart's one-track mind? Is there anything of old Cat left? Well, yes, it's what lingers, which is what we talked about a little bit earlier. So what lingers is her drives and what she's trying to do. I think you could certainly say that she is being clever in what she does. She has actually been very effective as leader of the Brotherhood Without Banners. If her objective is to be killing Freys and Lannisters, she's done very well. She's killed off several members of the Frey line of succession already. Nobody knows where she is. She's just a rumor, a legend there in the Riverlands. And although we're not inside her head, it looks pretty effective. She's created this mythos around herself, and she's got from nothing. Let's face it, literally, she came back from the dead with nothing. She's got a crown. She's found out a whole load about where Arya is. She's got a network of spies stretching out across the Riverlands. She still comes across as quite intelligent, one-tracked, but quite intelligent. Adam Dangersmith, do you think Linda Massey could end up being Melisandre? I just find it really curious. She keeps on being framed in the same color red over and over again. It feels deliberate. P.S. Love the fresh cut. Well, thank you very much. This is from House of the Dragon, I'm assuming. Her being framed in red again and again. I mean, I've not noticed this. I have to say, maybe someone's done a good video or article or something on it, but I've not noticed it. So the Masseys have got the three colors: the red, green, and the blue. After the three rivers, the red fork, the green fork, and the blue fork, and in a swirl. So that's the colouring that she hasn't. I think she had it certainly in season 2 at one point on her dress, in kind of like a swirl on her dress. Could she become Melisandre? I think it unlikely. So Melisandre, what we know of her history, we know she's old. We know that she was Melody, Lot 7, just from this is her memories. That appears to be, that means that she was a slave, so she comes from somewhere over to the east in Essos, and then she joined with the Red Priests, and she studied for a long time, learning all there is to know there. At some point, she went to Ashai. She'd learned a whole load of shadow magic in Ashai, and she has come over to Dragonstone. So if we're looking for someone who is potentially Melisandre, then we're looking at somebody who is potentially over in Essos, not somebody who is in Westeros. which is not to say it can't be. There's lots of people who it could be, and they could play it in a number of different ways. I did have the random thought maybe they're going to try and make Alice Rivers Melisandre. She, in the books, can see things in the flames. She, in the books, keeps herself looking youthful in the same way that Melisandre seems to do. So there's a lot there that you could sort of equate, but I think that on the show, they've pushed her way more over into the worship of the old gods, connecting with the Weirwood network and things like that. So probably not that. So I think you can't say no, but I don't see any evidence for it. If there is some red colour there, I have to admit I've not seen it, but I will take your word for it, and maybe there is some evidence I've not seen. Let's go to Sir Friend. I just answered Commander Ray, saying hello, Robert and Dan, and all the lords and ladies and common folk. Yes, actually, good opportunity for me to say thank you, moderators. If you are here watching live on YouTube in the chat, the reason why the chat is such a fantastic, interesting, positive place is because the moderators do an excellent job. Could you please show them a little bit of love if you are there? I hugely appreciate it. And while I'm doing thank yous, patrons, thank you so much. I can't do what I do without your support. So thank you very much. I hugely appreciate it. Question from Commander Ray. The recent episode of House of the Dragon was the best POV episode in Game of Thrones shows, and it makes me wonder what truly must be going on now with Lady Stoneheart, and if she has anything left inside of her beyond of Cat beyond the rage. I feel strongly she will give her borrowed life back to someone else, and she can finally rest with Ned. But is that Arya or Sansa or Jaime, perhaps? What do you think her POV would be like if George did a chapter from her? So a few different questions there. Firstly, in terms of the last episode 3 of season 3 of House of the Dragon, this was filmed as if it were a POV chapter of A Song of Ice and Fire, which I really appreciated. As a book person, I thought that worked really well. The way that the TV shows, pretty much all of the TV shows, other than A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, have been dotting about. We see a little bit of here, see a little bit there, a bit here. Each episode it jumps to like 7-8 different storylines. That's just the way that this has been told, which is actually different to how the books are told, which is we get a whole chapter's worth of one POV, and that allows us to understand where a particular person is coming from at a lot deeper level. So I liked it, and I thought it worked very well. I also particularly liked the kind of the West Wing style walk and talk kind of thing. It made me think. So my biggest takeaway from that is this is a failure of management structures. What Rhaenyra really needed to do was, I say my biggest takeaway, tongue in cheek, but what she needed was not to be the person taking all the decisions, because everywhere she went, someone was bringing a new problem to her. She needs to have people who she can say, okay, the Hand of the King is now dealing with the banners and the rats. The Master of Coin is dealing with how do we get more money. The Master of Laws is dealing with those things over there. Oh, she can then take an oversight at her small council meetings, and they can bring the high level things to her. Anyway, but that's by the way. So I liked the way that episode was structured. In terms of a POV from her perspective, Lady Stoneheart's perspective, we've thought about this for a while. George R. Martin said a while ago, and I think we should take him at his word still on this. He can change his mind, obviously, but I think we can take him at his word on this. He said a while ago that he wasn't going to introduce any new main POV characters. That doesn't mean we're not going to get a Lady Stoneheart chapter. We didn't when she came back, we didn't have it. And I think that was deliberate, that we saw her through other people's perspectives. So the air of mystery and uncertainty was still there. But it's not beyond the realms of possibility that he might give us Lady Stoneheart chapters. What would that be like? I mean, we don't know. If she is a Firewhite and Melisandre is a Firewhite, then what we learn from the Melisandre, we learned a lot of stuff in the Melisandre POV chapter, but one of the things is that actually it's not that far from like a normal human one. It's like, what's on her mind? What's she thinking about? Um, uh, why is she doing the things she's doing? That kind of thing. And so we could very easily get a Lady Stoneheart one. And what would we get from that? Well, I would hope we get a little bit more of a dimensionality to her, because as it stands, she is, somebody said it a little bit earlier, she is quite one-dimensional in the way that she's presented. She just wants revenge. She just wants to kill the Frasers. She just wants to kill the Lannisters. She just wants to find Arya. The end. There probably is more there, which I think, as I say, is hinted at with when she has the the crown, and Brienne sees her eyes glistening, which is like, there's some emotion there, isn't there? So if we did get a POV from her perspective, I would very much love to see the extra layers here. What else is going on there? Question from James Boris saying, to do the full story justice, HBO needed either longer seasons, this is talking I think about Game of Thrones, HBO needed either longer seasons or more of them. If this show was made in the 90s, every season would be at least 13 episodes, maybe a few extended ones, up to like 18 to 20 episodes near the end. Well, I mean, it's hard to disagree. They needed more episodes. I think I definitely agree with that. They did, not being a showrunner apologist here, they did suffer from not knowing what George R. R. Martin was going to do. But they didn't help themselves by deliberately cutting things down, which meant, in a way, that they couldn't actually do the endings that George R. R. Martin wanted. And he did some blog posts just after the event, which kind of tried to talk his way through this and sort of say, well, it's not going to be the same ending in the books because the characters are different, and some characters who are alive in the books were dead on the show. Some who are dead in the books are alive in the show, and there are some characters who are in the books who aren't in the show. And so when you extrapolate that out over a couple of books or a few seasons, we've got a whole different story. And my interpretation, I think a lot of people's interpretation, is that quite a few of the headline endings might well be true, in as much as Jaime and Cersei die together. Are they going to die together in the same way in the books as they did on the TV show? Well, no, very probably not. But they probably will die together. So yeah, it needed more. One of the things that I keep coming back to when I think about the story is that in our minds, I think we often think, oh, we're most of the way through the story now with the books. We're 5 books in, there's 7 books, there's only 2 to go, so he's just got to finish it off, really. That's not how it feels to me when I think about the story as a whole. Where the original pitch, and he's obviously moved away from this, but the original pitch was for 3 books. Book 1 was civil war within Westeros. Book 2 was Dany's invasion with the dragons, and book 3 was the others invading. On that original 3-book arc, we've still not even finished book 1 because Dany's invasion has not happened yet. So we're a long way away. I mean, I think in reality we're probably roughly half the way there, as in the story's got to its biggest extent. physically, in terms of distances, as much as anything else. The characters are as far away from each other as they ever will be. What we should see in the Winds of Winter is the characters starting to come back. So we have Danny off in the Dothraki Sea. We've got some characters over around near Marine. We've got Arya in Bravos, just to take the Essos people. By the end of the book, we would expect them to be coming together and heading over to Westeros, so that the Essos period of the story will be drawing to a close. Now, that means that we're halfway through. I still think, and insert your own cynical comments in the comment section, whatever. But from the presumption the books will be finished, I think 2 books is ambitious to finish this story. I think we will, at the very least, get 2 books that are each broken down into 2 books. The fact that he says that The Winds of Winter is going to be the biggest book so far, I think tells you that we're looking at 1,600 pages or so. But yeah, if we could have had 18 to 20 episodes in the final season, that'd be amazing. I think 6 episodes in the final season was not enough, but I'm not the only person, obviously, to say this. Question from Cathrine Furseth saying, "Hi, Robert. Lady Stoneheart has always confused me. Maybe it's just the exclusion of her together from the TV show. Being a book reader of A Song of Ice and Fire, I've always wondered what exactly George R. Martin intended to accomplish by adding her to the story. Yes, it's another example of resurrection, seemingly by the Red God. Yes, the theme of revenge, and also possibly on a metaphysical level, what lingers after we are dead. What do we leave behind? I would hate to think that George R. Martin thinks that only our darkest feelings and thoughts remain, or is it what lingers really more about the manner of your departure, as seems to be the case with Lady Stoneheart? What do you think? Why did he include her? What does her existence tell us about his worldview?" So I've sort of touched on a few elements of this already, I think. The what lingers thing seems to be quite critical here. I don't think that what lingers necessarily is a bad thing. It does probably weight towards where you were at, what you were thinking at your last moments. So if we take Beric Dondarrion for a starting point, he clearly, what lingered with him, what drove him after he'd been resurrected and was carrying on going, was something akin to what his charge was, which was he was trying to stop the Riverlands from being ravaged by the Mountain and others, and he was standing up for the common folk of that land, small folk. That seemed to be what lingered for him. What did not linger were things which were important to him, but were earlier on in his life. At one point, he bemoans the fact he can't remember the face of the woman he's engaged to, which is really sad. But it's very clear that that was a thing that wasn't present in his last moments. What was present in his last moments did linger. The earlier stuff did not linger. If we take that as the kind of the blueprint across to Lady Stoneheart, then we can say what lingered was what was there in her last moments, not what was there beforehand. So the softer elements of Catelyn Stark, which are there, the love for her children is still there, but perhaps the things she remembers are not that. The things she remembers are the betrayal of the Freys and the Boltons, incidentally. The Boltons, we don't talk about huge amounts in connection with her because they're not in the Riverlands. They're up in the north at the moment. So I think that doesn't tell us a thing about George R. Martin's worldview, other than how this bit of his magic works. What lingers is what was there just in the moments before you died. And then
at a sort of a broader level, why did he include her? I mean, she is foreshadowing. He has talked about Beric as being foreshadowing of John. And she is also, therefore, foreshadowing of John. But she's also this character when the Starks have vacated the Riverlands, which they have. So Bran and Rickon were never there. Robb is dead. John, all the way up in the wall. Sansa is gone over to the Vale. Arya is off in Essos. The Starks are not there. And yet this is the scene of the greatest crime against them. She is what lingers of the Starks in the Riverlands. So what we've got going on here is a need for, in this next book, the Riverlands to flip once more. In the last book, we had Jaime going from castle to castle, actually very effectively, and getting them to surrender to the Lannisters, basically. And he did a river run. He did it at Raventree Hall, a number of different places. He just went and he managed. He used his head. Another character who we don't automatically think of as being very clever. Jaime is very clever. You could just see it in his PFE chapters. So he makes it Lannister loyal. What's going to happen in this next book is that it's going to flip back the other way, and the Starks or the Tullys are going to be retaking. Commander A saying, I'm looking forward to the Iron Throne stage play. Hopefully we can get a recorded show, as until it comes across the pond, I won't be able to see it. Well, yeah. I'll reiterate the public service announcement I gave at the very beginning of this, which, if you're watching this a bit later, this will, I'm sure, mean nothing. The first two planned performances of the Mad King stage play, which were due to happen on the 20th and the 21st of July, have been cancelled. So if you have tickets for either of those performances, then please check your emails. I think you can get a refund, and they have put on an extra matinee performance a little bit later, a week or so later, for priority for people who missed out because of it. So do check your emails. But the Mad King stage play, we're still 2-3 weeks away from it. I stand by the fact that I think this is going to be the biggest log drop we've had for the World of Ice and Fire since Fire and Blood. So this is not written by George R. Martin, but he's very much on board with this, and it's just one stage play. It's about something that he views to be pivotal in the background to the story that he's got. He will want to make sure that there's nothing there that is contradictory to what's in the books. It has been very clear. It's been made very clear that this is within the book continuity, not the TV show continuity. So we will learn a whole lot of stuff. We have to learn a whole lot of stuff. Even just seeing how people relate to one another will teach us a huge amount. So I think this is very exciting. And in terms of recorded show, so they've not announced anything. At the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, they do record every performance. At some point, I think they've noted down which performance it is that's going to be recorded. They keep that for posterity. It's somewhere in the archives. That does open the possibility that it could be beamed out to a wider audience. I've not heard anything along those lines. The only thing officially that we've heard, semi-officially, is George R. Martin a long time ago on his blog, which he's been silent on now for 3 months, 4 months. Feel free to insert your own theories as to why. But a while ago, he did say that he was expecting it to start in the UK. He said London at the time, but
obviously it's Stratford-upon-Avon, which is a little while, 100 miles or so outside London. And after that, he was thinking it would go to New York and Australia. So I see no reason why next year it couldn't be over in New York. The one thing I would say in terms of staging, literally, is that they have made huge changes to the stage in the Royal Shakespeare Theatre in order to do this. It's now a cross shape they've had to take seats out. They've had to add in new staging. Lots of stuff has been going on there, which I guess, I don't know, but I guess is probably the reason why the first two performances have been cancelled, because that's just taken a little bit extra time to do that. But it does mean that the theatres that can host this will be relatively limited. I suspect that theatres will only take this on for a long period of time, so for a residency, and they will have to be quite large theatres. The stage will have to be quite big. We're all expecting jousting. Jousting requires quite a bit of space. So I think that means that we're probably not going to see, either in the UK or anywhere else, a regional tour. I don't think that's the way this is going to go. Some stage plays, after spending time in a big city, they will then go on a sort of regional tour to smaller theatres. I think that looks unlikely to me. But maybe we will get something recorded and beamed out. They certainly have for other things. I know Hamilton, I've certainly seen relatively recently on the TV. So maybe we'll see that. James Boris, my follow-up to my previous question is, would the actors, this is about Game of Thrones, I think, would the actors have stayed on board for an extended story, or would production realities prevent extended seasons? I mean, it's a good question, and I don't know the answer. I think the reality is George R. R. Martin, I think at the time, said something like, ideally he would have liked 13 seasons. Something along those lines. Would the actors have wanted to stay on for 13 seasons? I mean, I think they would probably have demanded more and more money, which would have made the budget higher and higher. And at that stage, it starts getting to, are you now being typecast as one character? So obviously contracts will be a big thing, and they would start to run out. And I can't really speak for any of the actors, but it felt to me like for some of them, it's not that they'd had enough. They felt that their time on the show had kind of run its natural course. I think if you'd said to them after season 8, well, here's another 5 seasons, I suspect some of them would have gone, I'm not sure I want to do another 5 seasons. So perhaps not. I don't know. There are very few TV shows that go on to that length of time without some cast changes, or a much smaller cast. You can probably think of some sitcoms, for example, that have gone on for a large number of seasons, but you're down to 5, 6 key members of the cast, rather than in Game of Thrones, massive cast. Okay, so let's just a quick flick through. There's anything else? I think that's me caught up in the chat. Carcast, my newfound fame, I still happily go to the shop and nobody recognises me, which I'm delighted by. Skegzilla saying, I hope the heat isn't getting to you. Not yet, but maybe it will over the next day or two. What would happen to Stoneheart if she found out that most of her children are still alive? Since revenge is her main thing, I can see her basically ignoring it and just keep killing. But this raises a question. If one of her children meets her, would being seen as a monster destroy her or make her worse? So, I mean, I think there's a couple of elements to this, obviously. In terms of what would be the impact of her meeting her children, discovering that her children hadn't been all killed. Well, the initial thing which kind of pushed her to what lingers with her was the Red Wedding. Robb Stark and loads of Bannermen were all killed, as was she. So there is still this desire, there would still be this desire for vengeance. I don't think that her discovering other characters would, other of her children are alive, would change that. However, I do think that this is the natural end point for her arc, is if she discovers that the thing that's been driving her, this need for revenge for the deaths of all of her children, Bran and Rickon are still alive, Arya is still alive, Sansa is still alive. If she then gets vengeance for the Red Wedding through a Red Wedding 2.0, providing some kind of poetic echo of it, that's the point at which maybe the what lingers is satisfied. So otherwise, yeah, I agree. She would just keep on going. She seems very happy to be killing people with tangential relevance to actually what happened at the Red Wedding. She was seemingly very happy to be killing Pod, who was a child with literally nothing to do with it, didn't even know it had happened. So, yeah, it's not. We often try and rationalize all these things. This does not seem to be 100% rational. The second thing about what her children would think. And I did a video a while ago about Arya and Lady Stoneheart, which actually someone here, I wish I could remember who, not just one person, several people in the comments over the years have suggested this idea that maybe Arya would kill Lady Stoneheart. There's a lot of echoing in their stories, it has to be said, all the way through. When you look at the gift of mercy from Arya, we think about the gift of mercy. She's the person who has the gift of mercy. She is the person who's giving the gift of mercy to people. All but one of the mentions of the gift of mercy is in relation to Arya. She gives it to people without even realizing she does. When she first arrives in the House of Black and White, she wanders in, doesn't meet anyone, sees the pool there, somebody sat by the side, and she just like scoops up some water and gives it to them, and they like drink it and then go and hobble off to one of the little alcoves and go to sleep. And it's only afterwards that she realizes, oh, hang on, what did I just do there? So she does give the gift of mercy without even thinking at it. And her name, the name that she has for the longest time period during this, is Mercy. And Lady Stoneheart, we call her Lady Stoneheart, but the other name she goes on is Lady Merciless, a deliberate echo. She's also, the other name that she's known for the longest is Cat. This is, Arya is known as Cat, which is obviously what Catelyn Stark is called. The echoes, it goes beyond just them being a mother and daughter. The echoes between them and their two stories is really strong. And this desire for people to die because they deserve it is very clear. This is the big point of dissension between Arya and the Faceless Men. It's not actually so much that you've still got your identity, you still think of yourself as Arya Stark. Yes, that's there. But the biggest thing is this feeling in her that someone has to deserve to die. You can't just kill someone randomly. There has to be a reason. This is what her list is. Her prayer is people who deserve to die. And the Faceless Men know all men must die. It's not about who deserves to die. All men must die. And Lady Stoneheart, theoretically, is there doling out vengeance for the thing that happened. These people should die because of this. They deserve it. In reality, she's killing lots of people who don't deserve to die. So the echoes are there. And the idea, perhaps, that Arya could give the gift of mercy to her mother is look at the video, make up your own mind. It's quite a tempting idea. If when they see her, any of her children sees her, will they see their mother? And I think the answer is they will recognize her, but she will be a monster version of their mother. Robert Messersmith. When John is resurrected, we know he'll be more wolfish. Do you think Ghost will become more John-ish in some way as well? Interesting question. So we're not told this. The being more wolfish concept comes mostly from the prologue chapter for Varamir Sixskins, where he runs through all the things he's been taught. He's a skin changer, and he runs through in this chapter a whole load of things that he's learned, he's thought about, he's been taught. One of which is because he's thinking about the end of his days and what he does and what his second life is, as they call it, when you go into one of your bonded animals. And what he thinks is you go into your bonded animal, and then yes, you have your second life, but slowly you become less and less you, and you kind of get subsumed within the animal. And the implication is, therefore, if you come back out, you will be more like that animal when you come back out. Does the influence go both ways? Well, quite possibly. But we've not been told that because we've not seen that. That's not a thing which is really on Varamir's radar as an idea. He's very selfish. Varamir Sixskins. He's only thinking about himself and what he might achieve and do. So yeah, maybe. But the thing about Ghost is that yeah, he's a direwolf and he acts like a direwolf, but he's also different. He's silent. He doesn't howl. He pads around. He's very close to John. Would we even notice if he's more John-like? It's not clear. Let's go to quick chat through Paul Whitrock. Hello, Robert. I've been thinking about Sunfire after episode 3. Do you think he's really dead and the showrunners want their own ending, further misdirect, or maybe he will be brought back somehow? Well, I've got a video on Sunfire coming out at some point soon. Book Sunfire. So what I'll say in the book spoilers, you know by now what the rule here is. The books have been out for a while. So what I say about what happens in the books, firstly, it's been out long enough that I don't count it as a spoiler. And secondly, as you say, and I will come on to, what happens in the books, the showrunners have been veering away from the books at various stages. So what happens in the books is that he's not dead. It's thought that he's dead, but he's not. And then he kind of gets attacked, but he's still alive enough to be like breathing fire on people. And he manages to stagger away and eventually works his way back to Dragonstone, where Aegon II is kind of drawn to him and finds him, and the two of them, Aegon is obviously also damaged from the fall from Rook's Rest. Him and his dragon, they recover in their cave until such point as they can come out and try to take Dragonstone. And when they do that, they then get sort of approached by Moondancer, and we get Baylor on Moondancer. There's a fight there. Sunfire is victorious, but takes even more injuries and sits there in the forecourt of Dragonstone, slowly dying until Rhaenyra turns up and then it is Sunfire who dispatches Rhaenyra before dying himself. So Sunfire in the books has a significant role. Do I think that he's still alive on the show? I see no reason why he's not still alive on the show. They would have to make some pretty big changes, it has to be said, to the story, added to which it just seems too coincidental that Aegon is heading there. So yeah, I've got no inside information. As you know, I get I do get screeners one episode in advance, which means I can't give you any spoilers on this one because I don't know any spoilers on this one. But yeah, I think it seems reasonably likely that Sunfire will be back. Because the situation is exactly, and I think this is probably the main point, the situation in the show is exactly the same as it is in the books, in that everyone thinks Sunfire is dead. It's just that Sunfire's not dead. And the person who would be most likely to have this kind of instinct feel that Sunfire's not dead is Aegon, and Aegon seems to be heading there. So, yeah. Let's go to Ricky Sanchez saying, you, sir, have the voice of a golden god. Well, thank you very much. I love your videos, especially the one about the situation in Winterfell. Cheers from South Dakota. Well, thank you, South Dakota. My voices are feeling a little bit croaky today, so I'm glad it's still sounding like a golden god. I mean, that's delightful. Right. Let's go to a question from Martin S. Saying, this is more sort of a broader question rather than just about Lady Stoneheart, about power scaling and power discussions in fiction. The argument goes something like this. Tolkien's Legendarium is high literature, whereas Dungeons & Dragons is a game, so they should not be analysed in the same way because they were created for different purposes. I agree, Tolkien's Legendarium, this is what Martin says, has vastly greater literary value than Dungeons & Dragons. That's not the disagreement. However, I don't think that means they are dealing with fundamentally different kinds of fictional worlds. The difference lies in the medium and its priorities, not the underlying genre. Literature and role-playing games are simply exploring fantasy through different lenses. Would you agree that the distinction between the medium of presentation and the underlying fictional realities are often overlooked in these discussions? Well, yeah, I mean, I completely agree. There are different things. So D&D is a world created for role-playing in, which has its own lore and history and things like that. Tolkien's is a world which was a legendarium, which was created not for stories, for tales, legends, basically, to be written in and experienced. So they're aimed at doing different things. So yes, they should be interpreted in different ways. I think the nuance on this is that D&D exists in the post-Tolkien fantasy world, by which I mean, and other people have said this way more erudite terms than I'm about to, but Tolkien dominates the fantasy literature world in a way that I struggle to think of another genre or subgenre is dominated by a single author. Everything that within the fantasy realm that was created after Tolkien has been, to a greater or lesser extent, either conforming to or reacting against Tolkien, is my view. It's happening. The further we're getting away from it, the more people are able to express themselves in completely different ways. But certainly when you come to the 70s and 80s, those perhaps like me who grew up reading epic fantasy stories will know the extent to which a lot of them felt very, very Tolkien influenced. And that is why George R. R. Martin is often seen as being like a reacting against Tolkien, because he's trying deliberately not to do the Tolkien thing. I include D&D within that. D&D is fantastic, but it is using the shorthands that Tolkien created. It allows you to, if you think of what is an elf in D&D, you're thinking of Tolkien's elves. If you're thinking what is a dwarf in D&D, you're thinking Tolkien's dwarfs. A halfling, Tolkien's hobbits. They couldn't say hobbit; that was copyright. But you get the idea. The structure of the world, the shortcuts, the things that the tropes, as it were, are there that allow you not to have to explain stuff. Now, what I mean by that, if you go over to science fiction, I'm sort of waxing lyrical to a slight digression here, but if you go to something like science fiction, when you get a trope, it's not just there as that, oh no, this thing again. It's there so you don't have to explain everything. Go to hyperdrive. Everyone understands what that means. We don't have to understand the science behind it. We don't have to understand all of the lore behind it. We just kind of understand instinctively what that is. And whether you call it hyperdrive or warp drive or whatever it is, we know this is like you press the button, you're going super fast through space that allows you to go from one solar system to another solar system very quickly. We get that, and that allows that world to exist, or the science fiction world to exist, without every single time stopping and explaining how this could possibly be. That is what we've got with fantasy, is that the shorthand, the language of fantasy comes overwhelmingly from Tolkien, and that is what is going on with D&D. So if we're talking about, are they is the discussion of the two, are we creating a sort of the different distinction between the two, that they should be viewed in different ways? Well, they should, but also they exist within the same kind of tropey family tree. Does that kind of make sense? As I say, some of the more modern fantasy within the last couple of decades, perhaps less so, but certainly during the time that things like D&D were being cultivated, it was heavily reliant on the concept and concepts of fantasy that Tolkien invented. Geet's saying, a general A Song of Ice and Fire question. Do you think Larys is magical and possibly uses the Weirwood network? He was very astute in getting Aegon II out of King's Landing just before Rhaenyra arrived. I know he's the spy master, but since he's from Harrenhal, I thought it was a possibility. Plus, with your latest video on Alice Rivers, you say that power comes with a price for Larys. That would be his club foot. Yeah, this is something that a couple of people, when Fire and Blood came out, a couple of people wondered this with Larys. That increased with House of the Dragon. I think nobody doubts he's a spy master. He can learn stuff the normal way. All spy masters understand and know a whole lot more than normal people within the realm. But the Harrenhal link is noticeable. In the TV show, they make Harrenhal way more magical than it comes across in the books. Now, that's not to say it doesn't come across as being magical in the books. It does. It comes across as being spooky dooky, and it comes across as having been built through the destruction of a whole load of weirwood trees. It's obviously on the shores of the God's Eye Lake, etc. But in the TV show, they really leaned into this. The weirwood tree is literally leaning out into the water, aching to get to the Isle of Faces. The walls, you can see the roots of the weirwood tree, and this is Ryan Condal has said this, that the design is intended to make it look like the weirwood tree is trying to reclaim control over Harrenhal. And then we get Alice Rivers, who, as I said, is really leaning more heavily into that side of magic, much more than comes across in the books. So with that as the concept, you have to say, well, Laris was there. Might he be a green seer? Several people were wondering whether or not back in season 1, maybe he was using the rats. Is he a warg? Can he get into the rats? That I don't think we've got any clear-cut evidence on this, one way or another. I kind of like the idea, but I don't think he's definitely Team Weirwood, if that makes sense. On the TV show, I think they're trying to tell us that Alice Rivers is. She's there very much on the side of. She's seen with the Green Men a couple of times, obviously with the Weirwood Network, wanting to get Harrenhal back for herself. The implication is that it has to be taken away from Laris, because at this moment in time, technically, Laris is the Lord of Harrenhal. So that seems to imply that she is wanting to take it away from him. The Weirwood Network are wanting to take it away from him, which seems to imply that he's not linked up with them. But we haven't got evidence against it, and I like it as an idea. It's just I don't think we've got the evidence. Martin S saying, I would say that RPG stats can be translations of narratives. If you assign a higher number to the broadsword skill in Barristan Selmy's stat block than ditto in Cersei Lannister's, that's not arbitrary. I would agree. Yes, so the translation of the narrative. Yeah, so that's the idea. With D&D, is you're trying to map out the character. In fact, it was a thing I really enjoyed when you get something like MERP. Does anyone remember MERP, Middle-earth role-playing? And then they would have the character sheet stats for some of the characters that we meet in the story, and I would love looking through them and trying to agree or disagree with what they decide. That's Ballerina. 1, is it significant that Lady Stoneheart was the 7th resurrection in that chain? In fact, she's related to multiple religions. The kiss brought her back, and in an early draft, it's hinted Bloodraven and Bran are the ones that stop her from killing Pod and Brienne through a flock of ravens, and she might get killed by a faceless man apprentice. What do you make of all of this? Well, shall we take a step back to Beric? Because Beric, for me, is the ultimate in kind of mixed magic-y messages. He's there brought back by seemingly the power of the Red God. He offers, when you get to the Sandor Clegane, he offers a trial by combat, which is a faith of the 7th thing. And when we first meet him there, he's sitting in a weirwood throne. He's just this strange mix-up of all of these kind of magical and religious imageries. I think that has flowed forward to Lady Stoneheart. I don't think it's a coincidence that she's number 7. I think that is George R. R. Martin having a bit of fun with it. The fact that she's come back from the dead from the water feels a little bit like Patchface, it has to be said. What kind of magic is going on there? She's obviously got the power of the Red God is working through her, and she was the person for whom a sept was built within Winterfell. Winterfell being this incredibly worship of the old gods kind of place, a sept was built there for her. So yeah, it's there's a lot going on with her. I think that what George R. R. Martin, if anything, is trying to do here is to show us that this isn't just this kind of straightforward, here's your magic system, you can have this type of magic or this type of magic or this type of magic. They all mix in. and it's kind of representative of the Riverlands, because the Riverlands is messy and it's confused, and there's lots of different actors trying to do lots of different things. It's not clearly this person against that person. There's lots of different things going on. So yeah, I think there's a lot of um, layers to what's going on there. But overall, yeah, uh, I wouldn't put this as she is therefore connected just to one, if that makes sense. Let's go to question from Not All Those Who Wander Are Lost, which is Lord of the Rings questions. What information is there about Legolas's mother? I know the Hobbit movies talk about her, but I don't remember any information coming up in the books, although it's been a couple of years. No, nothing comes up. I think we can try and read between the lines in terms of Thranduil he comes from the Sindarin, the high elf or the grey elf. It gets a bit complicated with Tolkien. Sort of links across from Doriath. That's where his family comes from. When we get to Legolas claims to be both a Sindarin and a Sylvan elf. The Sylvan elf being the wood elves that we know, who are the elves of Mirkwood. Now, it's not 100% clear whether that's because Legolas he's grown up there and that's what he considers himself to be culturally, but ethnically he's Sindarin. I tend to the view that it probably Thranduil married a Sylvan elf, and that is where Legolas comes. Does Thranduil go to Valinor after the War of the Ring? Does it specify anywhere what most of the Greenwood elves do? No, it doesn't. There's a lot of characters who it's not clear in terms of the elves whether they stay or don't or go. Literally yesterday, I put out a video about Elrond's two sons, who possibly the most high profile, other than Thranduil, characters who we simply don't know what they did. Tolkien kind of hints at things, but he doesn't tell us. He says that they might even use the word lingered. They tarried for a while. The kind of implications they probably went, but it's not 100% clear. With the elves of Mirkwood, the realm Mirkwood or Greenwood, as it once was divided up, and Thranduil got the northern half of the wood, which seems to imply that they were going to stay there for a while. The elves, most of them are gone within 120 years. My instinct is probably most of those elves went, but Legolas certainly didn't get the sea longing until he heard the gull calling, and Mirkwood is a long way from the sea, so maybe some didn't. They just stayed and slowly faded. And then you asked for a future video. Could I do something about the Witch King? I definitely will. Martin S. saying, I remember Middle-earth role-playing game by Iron Crown Enterprises. Absolutely. Still have it on my bookshelf. They did a decent job of statting Tolkien characters. Perfect would be impossible. I agree. Also, amazing pictures. Dig it out sometime. Have a look at some of the pictures. I think some of them are really beautiful. Lorelei Dragon. Which may well be, there were a couple here. One of these was from last week when I missed it. Sometimes where I cut and paste over from Patreon, and sometimes some things go missing, so apologies for that. Anyway, it seems that one of the central themes of A Song of Ice and Fire is the juxtaposition of perception, what everyone knows or believes, versus reality. What confounds me is why this makes the world so intriguing. We don't have one unreliable narrator. All the narrators are unreliable, and even facts about the world are provably false, with more information or a different perspective. Is it just because it makes the reader question everything that hooks us so effectively? I mean, that's certainly part of it. The fact that we can never be 100% certain, and this works at a number of levels. We have what we sort of broadly would call the unreliable narrator, which is that whoever's eyes we're seeing things through will only see some things. They won't pay attention to other things. They won't understand some stuff, and they will interpret things in strange ways. Now, a great example of this is Arya. There's one of my favorite chapters in all of A Song of Ice and Fire is the Arya chapter in Harrenhal, when she's seeing what's going on with Roose Bolton when he's clearly deciding to switch sides. She does not understand it. She meets a guy who talks about how he's been promised that he's going to marry a princess, but now he won't. And she's no idea what's going on there. But we know it's actually her. She doesn't think of herself as a princess, but if Rob's the king, then she's a princess. And so much of this just goes completely over her head. It's one of those chapters that you have to read at least twice, having read forward to what happens later and then understood everything that will happen later, so you can then see the foreshadowing that she wouldn't pick up on because she doesn't know what on earth she's looking for. So that's one element of it. Then you also get people like Cersei, whose just understanding of the world is very different. She will moan about the fact that the seamstresses are clearly making her dresses tighter and they're trying to hurt her, and it's like, nope, you just put on a bit of weight. You're just getting a little bit older. These things happen. But her way of interpreting the world is very different. We get that. We also get, and we do not know all of them yet, we get some actual complete misrememberings. So Sansa, with the unkiss with Sandor, is the classic example here. George R. Martin has noted it. There's a point where she remembers Sandor kissing her, but you can go back to that chapter and see he didn't. And so you then have to work out why this false memory. What's going on there? So yes, we're supposed to, and this is one of the delights of it, is that we can go back, having read it the first time, we go back a second time and we can reassess what we're reading, knowing more about what's actually going on in the wider world. At a more meta level, then the way George R. Martin is telling this story is through these two styles: the POV experiential style and the historical style, the maesters telling us what happened. Neither of them, I think we're invited to say, neither of them give a full picture of what actually happened. We can't trust everything that it says in Fire and Blood, because Fire and Blood obviously doesn't always agree with itself about what happened and when and where. But also we can't 100% trust the lived experiences of people, because they may not understand what was going on. They may miss things. They may misremember stuff. And so this is one of the big themes. And George R. Martin plays with these two styles of telling, or methods of telling us the truth of what is going on or what has happened, and lets us draw our own conclusions from that. Okay, Martin S. Angus McBride was an excellent MERP artist. Middle-earth role-playing. He painted most, if not all, of the covers. I have numbered prints of Arwen and Galadriel by him. Well, excellent. I can't remember the name of the artist, but thank you very much. Angus McBride. Yeah, I would agree. Excellent. let's go to Lorelei Dragon also saying, oh, what is something you would like to blame Bloodraven for, even though we have no evidence? Personally, I'm inclined to blame him for Lyanna entering the tourney at Harrenhal, but I can't say why, other than it makes sense to me and I enjoy the idea. Yeah, I mean, there's lots that I want to blame Bloodraven for. One thing that I can't prove, but I hope at one point we can, is the number of Targaryen deaths in a short period of time, starting with the turning Ashford Meadow and then working its way through the next 25 years or so. The number of Targaryen deaths is astonishingly high, beyond anything that you would go, well, that's just a series of accidents. And some of them you can write off as just being an accident, and some of them are, when you add in the Blackfires, some of them are very clearly Bloodraven actually killed that person. But there's a whole load of deaths that just seem like choking on a lamprey pie, that kind of thing. You go, oh, it feels kind of coincidental. And all of this led to Aegon becoming king, fourth son of a fourth son. I haven't done the maths recently, but in fact, I tried to do it when a few live streams ago. Jen Magician was in the chat, and we were trying to work out how many people had to die in order for Aegon to become king. The answer is something like 12, 14. I'll do the maths properly at some point. A lot of people had to in a short period of time. So, yeah, I in my mind, I'm pretty clear that Bloodraven was very strong on what is the exact right bloodline that needs to happen in order for there to be this prince that was promised. But at the moment, partly because we don't have Fire and Blood Part 2, partly because we don't have the later Dunk and Egg stories, we just don't have enough information to prove it one way or the other. Let's go to Rabbi Mitra saying, salutations, Robert and Dan the dog. Andre Santos in, yes, but they cancelled the first two shows of The Mad King, for which I had a ticket. Oh, I'm sorry, Rabbi. Yeah, I had a ticket as well for the opening night, so I'm also annoyed. So I want to tie in Qyburn's wonderful line about something lingers after death back to Lady Stoneheart. Beric's life force was seemingly lingering after his first death, which Thoros used magically to resurrect Beric. This kept happening until Beric himself passed his life fires to 3-day dead Catelyn Stark. Notice it is Beric's life fires that are apparently powering Lady Stoneheart in the story. Is there a narrative purpose behind linking this one life force between Beric and Lady Stoneheart? As in, are there clues in the text to suggest who this life force might go to post her death? My theory is that this narrative purpose is the opposition to the Lannisters. Both Beric and Lady Stoneheart essentially are alive now for this very purpose in the story. I'm therefore implying that when Lady Stoneheart dies in the Winds of Winter, the character who will be receiving her life fires and resurrecting will have to be the plot-wise best candidate to lead the opposition against the Lannisters. What do you think of this going, this future post Lady Stoneheart? So I don't think that we have to have the life force continuing is my first reaction to that. I think if Beric had wanted to, he could have just not passed it on. And yes, he could have kept on being brought back. But if he'd said, no, do not resuscitate, then I think the life force would go. I don't think it's just like, here's a life force which has to be inside someone. I think it kept on being brought back by Thoros. And then Beric decided to pass it on. So if Lady Stoneheart dies, as it were, and we still don't know exactly how that might happen because we don't know 100% how this works. But if she dies, then if she's not brought back, then that life force doesn't go on. So, whereas I could definitely see this idea that it could go to somebody else. I think it's possible. The logic implies it is definitely possible. I don't think it's a necessary part of the plot for that to happen. The question from Cas Ballerina: will the escaped Blackfish find and join Lady Stoneheart and the Brotherhood without banners? I think so. It kind of makes sense to me. I only spotted this recently. Jamie thinks, when he discovers that the Blackfish has gone, he thinks he's only coming back with a bunch of outlaws at his back, which feels kind of foreshadowy to the Brotherhood without banners. So yeah, I think he will. I think that there's a very real chance that well, actually, take a step back. One of the things, if you watch my video on the Second Red Wedding, one of the things which, again, I only really noticed recently was about Tom 07 Strings, who is this minstrel who attaches himself to Riverrun, basically. And he is there when Jamie arrives. He spots him. He grabs him. He says, "Come this way," and he takes him to Edmure Tully. You remember the scene? The siege of Riverrun's going on. Blackfish is inside. Doesn't want to give it up. What happens is Jamie persuades Edmure to go in as the Lord and say, "You have to hand over the castle." And he basically threatens him. He says, "If you don't do it, then I'll do all these horrible things to your wife and unborn child and all these other things." And he backs this up in the books by bringing Minstrel along and saying, "Okay, sit here, play him the Reigns of Castamere." And then Jamie goes. Now, there's a history between those two, because Tom 07, in his younger days, he wrote a rather rude song about Edmure Tully. And Edmure's like, "No, not him, just send him away." But leaving that to one side, Tom 07 is clearly working for the Brotherhood without banners. Edmure, before that moment, pushes back against Jamie. He doesn't agree. "Oh yeah, okay, I'll do this." And then Jamie leaves the bard with him. He's saying, "No, I'm not going to do it." And then Jamie says, "I'll leave this person here playing this song while I go away." And then we discovered that Edmure had changed his mind. So if you leave all of the outside story alone, what happens is Tom 07, an operative for the Brotherhood without banners, goes into a tent, is left alone with Edmure, who after that changes his mind, walks into the castle, frees the Blackfish. So this opens up the possibility. It's not definite, but it opens up the possibility that Tom 07 talked to Edmure and persuaded him to go in and do this and let the Blackfish out and tell the Blackfish, "This is where you need to go in order to find Lady Stoneheart." So that's the kind of the background. We've got that added to this kind of foreshadowy thing that Jamie says, if he comes back, he's coming back with a bunch of outlaws. And it's repeatedly said, he's a great scout. He knows the area. He would be able to find the Brotherhood without banners. He would be able to find Lady Stoneheart. There's no doubt about that in my mind. So of course, I think they will meet up. Darius Hutchinson, do the Golden Company have friends in other areas? This is a reference to the Golden Company saying they have friends in the Reach. Possibly, but they don't talk about it. When they're saying they've got friends, that basically these are families that were long ago linked across to the Blackfires, and they are hoping that they can still be persuaded to be on their side when they do come in and invade Westeros. So that is the implication, is that they've got strong allies potentially in the Reach, but them having allies in other places, yeah, definitely. Ballerina, picking up a question for H. Will. Thank you very much. I love it when people do this, pick up questions for other people. Wants to know about the potential for a trial by 7 involving the Brotherhood Without Banners and Jaime and Brienne. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. So, I mean, it's not something I've worked my way through hugely, I have to say, but I mean, I'm liking the possibilities. That my working assumption is, so Jaime gets brought to Lady Stoneheart, and she will obviously find him guilty. Let's not forget the Lannisters send their regards was a show quote in the books. One of the last things that Cat heard was Jaime Lannister sends his regards, which is a bit unfair on Jaime Lannister because he knew nothing about this. It was literally nothing to do with him. This was, I mean, he's not innocent. He was part of Team Lannister, but this was his father. This wasn't his doing, and he definitely wasn't sending his regards because of what he knew what was going to happen in the Red Wedding. Where that came from, which is a digression, but when Brienne was bringing Jaime down to King's Landing after he'd been freed by Catelyn Stark, he got his hand chopped off. Jaime had his hand chopped off. That left Roose Bolton in an awkward position because he was in the middle of negotiating with Tywin Lannister about switching sides, and Jaime was about to go over to Tywin Lannister. And the last thing he wanted was for Tywin Lannister to think that he, Roose, had chopped off his son's hand. So they have this fantastic conversation that is operating at a level that Brienne doesn't really seem to get. But again, Jaime, as I say, Jaime comes across as a very clever, he understands what's going on politically. And he and Roose have this conversation where Roose basically says, okay, well, I'll let you go, but on the condition that you say nice things about me to your father and reassure him that the hand thing was nothing to do with me. And as he goes, Roose Bolton says, send my regards to your father. And Jaime says, and send mine back to Robb Stark. It's kind of a semi-joking way. Roose Bolton then took that. Oh, Jaime Lannister sends his regards. He found that funny, I'm sure, or at least politically appropriate. Other people will have heard it. If anyone did survive that, then they might be blaming Jaime. So that's where that whole thing came from. She will think he's guilty, and she will want to kill him. She's wanted to kill people who've had a whole lot less to do with this than him. How is he going to get himself out of this hole is the big question, because he has to somehow. I think I'm not alone in thinking that he's going to survive. Might he? And my working assumption is that he will, like Brienne. Brienne got out of it by basically agreeing to do Lady Stoneheart's dirty work for her. And what she tends to do is quiz the person and then kill them. So she will quiz Jaime on what's going on, and he will be saying, oh yes, and there's going to be this wedding happening and all the Freys and Lannisters are going to be invited. His get out, my working assumption is that his get out is to be a part of this, to let her in. He will turn up at this wedding and open the gates, whatever, I don't know. But he will be a part of handing over to her the opportunity to be getting her vengeance against the Freys and the Lannisters. Other than that, he could demand a trial by combat. The echo here is Sandor Clegane had a trial by combat against Beric Dondarrion. And obviously Beric has passed his life spirit into Lady Stoneheart. And whereas Beric was, Sandor was guilty of some things, he wasn't really guilty of all of the stuff that he was being accused of. And the same could be said for Jaime. And so if he demands a trial by combat, it surely wouldn't be against Lady Stoneheart, but if he got one, then that could work. Would she be able to say no? If she's being an echo of Beric, then maybe not. But all the way through this, we have had this issue, and it has to, at some point, this will have to play out. Jaime lost his hand. He used to be one of the greatest fighters in the world. Now he's not, because he's using his wrong hand, and he has been trying to train himself up, but he's not as good, and he's feeling quite insecure about this. So would he even be able to survive it? We don't know. So yeah, it's possible. It's possible that he might call for it. He's already, if you want even more kind of echoes, he's already basically refused to be involved in a trial by combat for Cersei. So Cersei wrote him a letter basically saying, I need you to come and be my champion, because I've been accused of all these things by the faith. And he read it and he threw it in the fire. So he's refused to be involved in a trial by combat for Cersei. Might he be forced to do it for himself? So, as I say, there are lots of these kind of echoes in there. But on balance, probably I would say the thing is for him to be recruited in to be helping them get access to Riverrun. Okay, let's go to Bang saying, in a recent interview with George, he said that he planned to have Sansa killed but decided not to. When do you think her death would have happened? This is a good question. Yes, so this was a really good interview, actually, it has to be said, which was done just before Christmas, and it was released in January, sometime just before Night of the Seven Kingdoms. So he was asked by James, I've forgotten his name. He did the Hollywood Reporter, and he did the book Why Cannot Kill a Dragon, which was like the insider background and history to Game of Thrones. I found that a really interesting read, actually. Interviews with the showrunners and George R. R. Martin and the actors and the production staff about the making of it, and there's a lot of really interesting tidbits came out from that. But here he is interviewing George R. R. Martin about a wide range of things, and George R. R. Martin in this does say that he had been planning on killing Sansa, but actually he saw her ending on the TV show, and now he's thinking maybe he'll let her survive, which is significant not just for Sansa, but also this is, I think, the first major thing that he said that he has been influenced by the TV show and changed his mind about what he's going to be doing in his story because of what happened on the TV show. And this is obviously in a positive sense, if that makes sense, is that he saw something that he liked on the TV show and he's decided he's going to go along with that. So he saw, one assumes, it's literally just a sentence, so we can easily read too much into it. We assume he saw that last image scene we have of Sansa becoming the Lady of Winterfell, the Queen in the North, and he liked it. And I have to say, I always liked at a high level where Sansa's arc was going, which I thought was where it was going in the books, which took her from being in Winterfell but not wanting to be there, having this kind of wide-eyed view of the world, and going down to King's Landing and slowly working her way back up after this selection of pretty horrendous characters in control over her, and then ending up being in the only place that actually she was safe, which is Winterfell, and not under anyone's control, being in charge, which kind of worked for me. And I wonder whether that's what George R. R. Martin was thinking. Actually, yeah, that does work quite well as an arc for her. But it does obviously make you wonder where, therefore, would she have died? I don't know is the short answer. I don't think we're told, but or as in, I don't think it's foreshadowed anywhere in particular. But I think the same thing that I can remember having these conversations when we got to season 8 of Game of Thrones, to was it episode 3, the one with the Battle of Winterfell. I can remember talking to people beforehand and saying, characters have to die in this episode. This has to actually mean a thing. The others, after all of this, they have to be showing that this is not just peripheral characters who you've been introduced to for an episode or two and then they go. We have to actually feel this. So I wonder whether Sansa will be one of those, because her arc does take her up to Winterfell. It does involve her in the Stark succession crisis, but after that, is she needed? Maybe not. So I wonder whether she was going to be a kind of a sacrificial victim to show how significant this threat is. Otherwise, we've got, well, Jon's not going to die there. Bran's not going to die there. Tyrion's not going to die there. All these characters who've got their plot armor, who's left? Right. Is that me caught up in the chat? I think it might be. Oh, no question. Darius Hutchinson, should George R. Martin do a northern version of Fire and Blood timeline? I mean, I think that would be excellent. But let's finish off the rest of Fire and Blood Part 2. All of the Duncan Egg stories, Winds of Winter, Dream of Spring. I think he's got enough on his plate. I would love it, but I think he's got a lot going on. When real, what makes both fire and ice whites qualify as whites? Has anyone compared fire and ice white characteristics or explained the differences? For example, are they all in fact animated dead? Well, this obviously comes from George R. Martin. We just talked about whites before until I can't even remember when it was. This was during Game of Thrones. There was an interview with someone like Vanity Fair, and he said, and it has relation here to Lady Stoneheart, but he was saying that Beric Dondarrion as a fire white offered some foreshadowing of Jon, or words to that effect. And that was really what prompted the Song of Ice and Fire community to start differentiating. Here we've got ice whites, here we've got fire whites, science whites. So these different types of whites. Now, in terms of the difference between fire whites and ice whites, I think that there is they're not just like, what's the type of magic that powers them kind of thing. These are completely different things. Ice whites, the whites that the others have, are corpses that have been animated. Now, they seem to remember some things. There seems to be some things that linger in terms of when, if you remember those two whites that way back in book one, the Night's Watch, they bring them through they discover them north of the wall. They don't know really about whites at the time, two dead bodies, they bring them through. And then they animate when they're south of the wall. They seem to know where to go in Castle Black. They were dead Night's Watchmen. The clear implication is that something lingered of their memory about that. However, as far as we can tell, all of their previous personality, anything like that, has gone. They are just dead bodies that have been animated. It seems to be the flip version of the skin changing, in that, say, Bran, for example, he can skin change into Hodor, a live human, and take control of him as a live human. The others can take control of dead humans and dead other things. So it seems to be that seems to be the kind of the difference between the two. Now, there's a moral issue there. I suspect George R. Martin would want us to be pausing for one moment and going, which is morally more right, to be taking control of an inanimate thing or a real human being? I don't think he gives us the answer, but I think he wants us to consider it. So, but that's what ice whites seem to be: animated corpses that may have some lingering memories from who they were before. Fire whites, such as Beric, it's still Beric. He has been brought back. Whatever lingered of him is still there, and it is still attached to him. He is not being animated by a third party, moving him about to do things. He still seems to have volition of who he is and what he does, and that seems to have passed on to Lady Stoneheart, as far as we can tell. So these are different things going on. One is the animation and direct control of an inanimate body, and the other is the putting a degree of life essence into something that has previously died. Okay, so a question from Lady Pushkin's asking whether if Lady Stoneheart finds out about Bran and Rickon being alive and about Jon Snow's parentage, will she be able to take the information in? I get the impression she will start to fade and not sure her mind is fully functioning, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, it's hard without being inside her mind. It's hard to know quite how nuanced this is. We talk about her being single-tracked, single-focused, just caring about revenge because that's all we see. But it's possible that there's other things going on behind the scenes. How would she take it? I think, I can't back this up, but I think that she would take in the fact that Bran and Rickon are alive and accept it and understand it, because of the thing I've mentioned a couple of times, which is when she's there, Brienne comes in and sees her for the first time, and she's got that crown, and then her eyes are glistening, and it's like that. Whether or not that's crying, there's clearly some kind of emotion going on there. She's remembering her son. She's sad about whatever it is. There's something going on here, and I think that implies that she would therefore be able to react. I don't know whether react appropriately, but she would be able to react and take in the information about Bran and Rickon. Also, when she's there, we see her with Brienne, and she seems to be capable of, I mean, via a translator, she seems to be capable of having a conversation. She's very focused and clear in her own mind on these things. She doesn't seem to be able to bend her views in any way, but she's able to have a bit of a toing and froing, and even a negotiation of sorts, really, with Brienne. So yeah, I think so. In terms of the Jon Snow's parentage, I talked about that a little bit earlier. I think that for a host of practicality reasons, she won't find this out. And if she does, she may still just not agree. because I think a lot of people will. We've banked this now. We've been thinking about the fact that we know who Jon Snow's real parents are, and it's just, how is this going to be spread? This information going to be disseminated? That just because somebody just turns around and says, "Oh, did you know, by the way, Jon Snow's real parentage is that?" There will be people going, "I don't think he doesn't look like a Targaryen." What's the most likely thing? The most likely thing, really, it's Ned had an affair, and that's his son. He looks like Ned. He acts a bit like Ned. Must be Ned's son. Why didn't he say so before? So there will be some doubters. Let's put it that way. And if you had to guess who one of the doubters would be, then I would say Lady Stoneheart. Last question from my patrons. Now is a good time to drop any more questions into the chat. I'll try and pick up a few more of them before we end. But question from Charlotte Pelgen saying, "Hi, Robert. Happy Thursday. Big fan from Germany. Guten Abend to you. With a last-minute question unrelated to today's topic. Do you think there is any kind of link between the preternatural event and dragons? Was there some kind of connection between the dragons and the others from the start? If I remember correctly, winters got colder or longer after the death of the last dragon. Is this just because their disappearance weakened the magic associated to fire and warmth and allowed the ice magic to become stronger, or is there more?" I'm having a hard time phrasing the question the right way, but perhaps you understand what I mean. Yeah, so, I mean, there's a lot there. In terms of the preternatural event, in case people are wondering what this is, the very first blurb on the back of the very first edition of the very first book of The Song of Ice and Fire, A Game of Thrones, started out with the saying that a long time ago, a preternatural event caused the seasons to go out of balance. Preternatural, magical, basically, unnatural, magical kind of thing. And people have speculated because, in my mind, clearly the seasons being out of balance is a part of this, because this is set out so early on as a thing in this world. It has a fantasy, a magical cause. George R. Martin has been very clear about that. People have suggested, "Oh, is this because the planet is going around in an elliptical movement with the moon doing that?" And he's saying, no, forget trying to explain this with science. This is a fantasy world. There's a magical reason for this, and it happened because of a magical thing happening. Now, my long-standing working theory on this is that the magical thing that happened to cause the seasons to go out of balance is the creation of the others. The others were the original big baddie of this, and they still are. And the creation of them, however that happened, will have been a massive event that will have shifted things. The Children of the Forest seemingly were capable of massive magical things. The Hammer of the Waters destroying a land bridge. This is big stuff. So that's my working assumption, is that was what caused the seasons to go out of balance. And when the others come in, whenever they approach, that's when winter, real winter, comes and affects it even more, because they bring the cold. You read back the prologue to book one, it makes it the most obvious, as they're complaining about the cold in the north. It's colder than it should be, but then the moment that the others are close, it gets freezing cold. This is the kind of, like, can anyone survive in this kind of cold? So that's where I think is going on there. You do remember correctly, as an offhand comment from Dunk's memory of what Sir Arlen said, that after the last dragon died, then the summers were shorter and the winters longer and harder. Now, Sir Arlen, we've got no reason to doubt him. He seems like an honest enough guy with a reasonable enough judgment about the seasons. So we probably shouldn't think about people about whether that's true. It probably is true. We do know that there is a link between dragons and magic. I tend to think of it as the ambient level of magic in the world. When the dragons return, when Danny's dragons hatch, then more magic is possible. The glass candles start working. The alchemists guild, the pyromancers in King's Landing, they turn to Tyrion and say, we're finding it a lot easier to do our stuff. Are there any dragons around, just by any chance? So it is known, and it's not just this is a thing which is happening in the background. The people, the magical type people in this world understand there's a link between the presence of dragons and this kind of ambient level of magic in the world, how effective magic can be. So those are the moving parts in all of this. Is it possible that the preternatural event has something to do with dragons? Well, we don't know how long the dragons have been there for. It is possible. I'm not ruling it out. But and certainly the dragons, if you had to pick something that could help fight against the others, then dragons would be it. The others seemingly are there as a creation to be combating humanity's greatest strengths. That the others are stronger than humans, and every time a human dies, then the others get that person as a recruit to their side, and they're also resistant to the types of metal that humans use. So if you're designing somebody to be better than humans, that's where the others are. If you're designing somebody to be better than the others, maybe dragons would be. So yeah, it's entirely possible. I don't think we've got enough information yet on this. My working assumption is that the preternatural event was the creation of the others. Whether dragons were around during the first long night, the only thing I have, two things I have against this, is we're not told that they were in any of the stories. We hear about heroes in the world of Ice and Fire, a few named heroes who took the fight against the others. We know of Azor Ahai. Azor Ahai's story is that he forged a sword and then used that to be fighting monsters. And then we get the last hero who goes off and finds the children of the forest who help. And then you get the battle for the dawn, where you get the Night's Watch taking on the others. And in all of these things, I've mapped out several times how I think they all fit together. One of the things which is noticeable is that none of these stories are about dragons. One would have thought if dragons had been around at that time, someone would have mentioned it. So that's my first quibble with the idea that dragons were around in that first long night. The second is that we have stories about how the dragons came to be. Were they made by the Valyrians? Were they sort of brought across, and the Valyrians learned how to tame them from the people from Ashai? The fact that there are these kind of stories which are linked to when the start of the Valyrian freehold was, implies, because the Valyrian freehold happened significantly after the first long night, that implies that the dragons weren't around and weren't being ridden or tamed before that. So a couple of things. All of this is legends. George R. Martin cautions us every time. All of these stories in his world, the legend, they should be treated, stories from the Age of Heroes should be treated the same way we would treat legends in our world. There's probably some truth there, but don't take them literally true. So what we can do, though, is say that there's nothing that categorically says, yeah, the dragons were involved right from the start. Cos Ballerina, will her body, Lady Stoneheart, make it to the Winterfell crypts after she's gone for good? What's the difference between Lady Stoneheart and Cold Hands? Well, she's not a Stark, so no, which is, I mean, it's a bit harsh. We don't know the exact rules for who should be in there, but it certainly seems to be the Lord of Winterfell, or the King of Winter, is buried in the crypts and gets the statue. And then the members of the family, so the children of that Lord, also do. It's just that they don't typically get the statues. We're not told what happens to like the spouses of the Lords of Winterfell. It would make sense that they were buried next to their husband, the Lord of Winterfell, but we're not told that. So I don't think that Cat is she's never specifically said, oh, I hope my bones go up to Winterfell or anything like that. She doesn't ever think of Winterfell as home. And when she does die, then the phrase give her a mockery of a Tully death, right? Which seems to imply that that's how they view her. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that one. But what's the difference between Lady Stoneheart and Cold Hands? Well, again, we haven't been given the details of this. But Cold Hands died a long time ago, and he was reanimated. He still seems to be him, so there's a similarity there to what's going on with the Firewights that we know of. But he doesn't seem to have been reanimated by the Red God. He seems to have been reanimated by the Children of the Forest, maybe Bloodraven, maybe. So that they are similar, but they're and similarly they've got Lady Stoneheart clutched across her throat, and Cold Hands, he has a scarf across there because he talks like with this rattle. So there are deliberate echoes there, but no, they seem to have been done using a different magical system. But yeah, also Lady Stoneheart seems to be this kind of what something lingers. All that remains of her is the desire for revenge, etc. That we get Cold Hands, who seems a lot more well-rounded, a lot more chilled. He seems very clear on what his role is and what his duties are, but he doesn't seem to be as focused. It's probably different magic. Okay, let's have a quick flick. That's all my questions from my patrons. Have a quick flick through the chat. Tommy Offen's just saying, I saw it on some Westeros forum post from like 2011. That's one of the things I love is when you get, I've no idea what that was, but when you get theories and ideas that have been around for that long, they still stick with you. Right, let's have a Stefan Frederick saying, help Indie Geek get to 1 million subscribers. Yeah, so the main channel, we're nearly there. 989,000. It's not long now. So maybe fingers crossed at some point this summer we might get there. That would be very exciting. Okay, I think with that, let's say next week will be a pre-recorded live stream. So I will let you, patrons, I will let you know over on Patreon what the subject will be, and if you can send some questions through in advance of that, and then I'll pre-record that one for next week. And similarly, I may or may not be able to do the post episode instant reaction video, which I don't know. I hope you've been enjoying them. They've been quite good fun for me. But let's just say what's happening. What have we got? I can remember what there was coming up next. Is it Alice Rivers? That video's come out already. I lose track of what videos are coming out. Sunfire's coming out soon. I remember that. I've got one on Caraxes coming out soon. I remember that. What else shall I plug? Remember to plug. If you are interested in videos on my main channel, but find it easier to go onto Spotify or Facebook, Facebook, or as podcasts generally, I'm trying to put it out there into those other places. So still free at the point of access. So if you find it easier to access it there, please do go and check out those other places. And also, if you like great stories, then check out The Well Told Tale, which is my audiobook channel. So that's just me narrating what I consider to be the finest science fiction and fantasy stories ever written. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard, H.G. Wells. We're going through Frankenstein at the moment, kind of thing. So if you're interested in that, then do go and check out The Well Told Tale. But if you have reached the end of this video, thank you very much. A big thank you to my patrons. I can't do what I do without your support. If you would like to support this channel, Patreon is still the best way to do that. And there's a link going to be appearing somewhere around here. And moderators, thank you for all of your work. I hugely appreciate it. If you'd like to watch more of these live streams, there's a link appearing somewhere around here. That is all for this time. Take care, everyone, and I will see you again next week.